Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz singer and songwriter Candice Hoyes of the band Nite Bjuti. This new album taps into the transcendent communicative powers shared amongst the trio to delve into the spiritual intimacies of Black life. Candice opens up about the band and her life and music. This group, pronounced Nite Bjuti, is a trio of Black women artists who weave multiple strands of storytelling using voice, bass, electro, percussion, and turntables. Joining Candice is bassist Mimi Jones and Grammy Award-winning soundchemist Val Jeanty. She's got a great story. Enjoy this interview.
I appreciate you taking a minute out. I love the album, and I want to, before we dive into the project, I want to know, the last 3 years with COVID was quite a thing for all of us, especially the world of musicians and jazz. How did you survive that time period? How good does it feel to have a new album out now?
I mean, this album, I feel, spiritually really buoyed us. This was something that I applied for a grant when I had a very young baby, and I was kind of in a sleepy haze in a way, but also profoundly grateful for this new life in my, in my midst. And so it was an exciting time. And then, of course, never anticipated what this stretch of, global tragedy and disruption. It turns out that for artists such as the three of us, disruption is where we thrive, and it's so much a theme of the work that we're doing and our practice that we were really able to connect with each other across the distance and create in a way. What's fascinating is we had a lot of performance before the world sort of shut down. Like, we were at New York City Jazz Fest and in February, and that was where we did an hour-long improvisation on New York's WBGO on Kiana Faircloth's show, and that was, I think, some sort of historic event to have three women and to have three improvisers on afternoon jazz. And it was just really special. That festival has been so supportive of our journey. And then everything happened in February into March. And we then inherited a really amazing opportunity to be a part of a project dedicated to the unquantifiable influence of Wayne Shorter, and just a celebration at his birthday at the time. And so we recorded a piece of his for a compilation, which he was, basically kind of he listened to everything, and we got this Zoom video back with him in conversation with some other absolutely incredible artists and talking about us. And that was hugely inspiring. So I would say we were really guided in many ways by people we admire and by our own calling to what we wanted to say, to just proceed through the pandemic with a recording. We did it that way. We were in the studio very deftly and intentionally and strategically around the different waves of COVID, and largely, obviously at our own expense. And we were just on the razor's edge and recording this. And so it's kind of a revelation to have it out in the world, and yet I don't think we ever stop believing in it.
So talk to me a little bit about, Nite Bjuti. Like, what's your hope for this album for the listener?
Our hope is that the listener feels seen and heard and the listener comes, feels the warmth and the connection and wants to come with us on this journey, where we present a lot of questions, and you will hear our influences. You will hear Sun Ra, you will hear the blues, you will hear spoken word, you will hear Afro-Caribbean rhythms that we associate with, like, rituals and holidays and carnival, and some of the intergenerational celebrations that characterize our backgrounds. And you'll also hear, 3 individuals, contemporary artists. You'll hear women and our stories speaking through those influences. And hopefully that pulls a certain expansiveness out of the listeners. And we love to, there's no improvisation for us unless we're in a circumstance where, we're with an audience. And so they're a huge inspiration for us, and the energy we feel from the audience is what inspires what we play. They're like the 4th person in the band. It's not like we come with things sort of in a can and just open it for, and say dinner is served. The audience and that energy, the, vibration of the space that we're in and the city and the environment is all in the music. It's all in what we play. So we hope that folks just feel welcome to feel a lot and to dream and imagine and reimagine. That's our greatest hope, that connection.
So how did this talented trio come together?
Well, I'm an archivist, and that for me means that I'm sometimes, quite frequently, like many musicians, singing other people's compositions, and always in relation to the canon, the musical canon, whether it's jazz or classical music, American Songbook. So I have a very, like the 3 of us have, a very active participation in that as jazz artists. And I also have a background in humanities. I was an African American Studies major. I went to Columbia Law School. I'm very aware of literature, film, notions of citizenship and social justice movements. Those things are always present in my imagination and how I choose repertoire. And then when I met Val through a performance we did at Jazz Lincoln Center, we had a fantastic musical conversation. We improvised the day we met, and before an audience at Jazz Lincoln Center. And it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like another homecoming, a new dimension that we found that we felt just right for us. We continued in the studio, and we were playing and talking. Subsequently, like we're New Yorkers, and we'd get together and play and talk. We became friends. And she's like, a colleague of mine at Berkeley is, I think, that piece that we need to make this triangle, And I said, tell me. And she said, Mimi Jones. And I said, I love Mimi Jones. I had just met her at a Recording Academy Women in Jazz event, and she told me about some of her compositions, and I had, of course, heard her play. Her reputation, precedes her. Like, she's amazing. And when we got together at New Blue at the time, it was just so breathlessly beautiful and moving, and we all felt this joy. And we could feel that people with us in the audience felt the joy too, and they just enjoyed seeing us together and watching us, move through this performance, and we loved it. And so we kept it. And, we've since collaborated with dancers. I've since expanded my visual arts practice, and so I've created different projections that I trigger through the performances. You can see some of those online. And we're just always looking to expand.
So talk to me a little bit about, kind of your beginnings in music. Where were you born and raised, and how did, music and more specifically jazz become this world that it's become today?
Well, I used to think that I was the first artist in my family, and as I matured into an adult, I realized not so. I'm of Jamaican parentage. I was born in New York, uptown, where my parents immigrated, and their parents immigrated to New York. Subsequently, I grew up in Florida because of my parents and their careers, and returned to New York after going to Harvard for college. And at that time, I wasn't sure how to navigate as a musician professionally, because I didn't ever see that in my own, I guess, sphere, my family or anything. And I was accepted to Columbia Law School. I went to law school, and I was very focused in immigration law. I did a clerkship in that, and I had, some wonderful opportunities and published a note. And I studied with Kimberly Crenshaw, who is the world-renowned scholar very much at the forefront of the conversation on critical race theory. And intersectionality is a term that she coined. And I was in that mix. And I realized that there's something I really wanted to say that felt like it was still coming through music rather than law. And I applied for a master's in music. I got a scholarship to Westminster Choir College, and I started a career in opera. That was not a shock to me. I was all through Harvard. I was singing and exploring classical music, among others. I sang many kinds of music in college. And growing up, it was more musical theater. And before I was any kind of soloist, it was music in church. And before I remember church, I remember music at home. Dub, reggae, soca, all the musics that Caribbean children grow up with were a vibrant part of my earliest memories. Somewhere in there, I started piano lessons also. But as I mentioned at the beginning, the first artist in my family, it wasn't me, it was actually my grandmothers. They were both designers, fashion designers, and they had a private clientele and a day job, working multiple jobs to support our family and, foster a new life in the United States. They weren't properly accredited and their name wasn't on the label, but my paternal grandmother in particular was a kind of ghost designer for a large fashion designer. And the two of them would make things for everyone in the family and even make things for each other. And that, I think, has so much to do with the way I see music. I see it as something that I dream up and I sort of cut to the shape of what I've dreamed. And the genre is not really, ultimately determinative of what I'm going to make. And Nite Bjuti has been great in that regard because that's really what we do. We have the story and then we manifest the sound that tells that story.
So tell me, what was the very first live jazz show you ever saw that really inspired you?
Boy, I think because the jazz, my first exposure to jazz was in my grandparents' apartment. And my grandparents, my grandmother is still with us. She's 100 years old. And they lived in a building where my father immigrated to in Queens, one of the jazz buildings called Dory Miller. And their best friends were the Heaths. So Jimmy and Mona Heath. And at the time, they were just Mr. and Mrs. Heath to me. In that building, before I was born, Cannonball Adderley lived. There were just, my grandfather was a taxi driver, and he also drove Thelonious Monk. And so this was like a place, this was like my weekend. Every weekend was this. Weekdays were Catholic school in the suburbs, and weekends were in this environment. And I was hearing a lot of records, and my grandfather loved vocalists, had seen Billie Holiday. Both grandparents had seen her many times. The first jazz that really spoke to me in a way where I felt like I could understand it was actually probably not, it's not really jazz, but it was Wynton Marsalis and Kathleen Battle and this PBS special that they did that used to air for years on PBS. At this point I was in Florida and wasn't able to really go to clubs. Like I told you, I'm the first professional musician in my family, so I wasn't in a club environment. But I was watching the two of them navigate their backgrounds and like work together to find a sound. And I was totally fascinated, and I thought they just looked so cool and so found a way to be so comfortable in the Baroque music element while also knowing that they could sing and play in many styles. You hear Wynton playing jazz, and you hear Kathleen Battle singing gospel, and then they come together and make this record, which is a third thing, and they're creating ornaments, and I was like, I like the flow of all of this. And then I had the privilege, which is the magic of being an artist, that it's hard to express when people ask, whether you're famous or not. Like, extraordinary things occur, and I worked with Wynton and recorded with Wynton years later. So magical things happen for us. And for me, one of those moments was getting to work with Wynton years later at Jazz at Lincoln Center and performing a piece that was so important to him, the Abyssinian Mass, and ultimately touring it for a month with Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra and being a part of that double album. And so the full circle of that is just like phenomenal to me. And yeah, certainly like some of the best concerts and the most exciting concerts for me. I love Rochelle Farrell. I love Diane Reeves, Cassandra Wilson. I'm always listening. I love Gene Baylor. There's so many great concerts that I've seen, and I'm, I guess, always a student of the voice. So I'm always interested to hear singers. Dee Dee Bridgewater's huge influence in so many ways. I was listening to, when I got to, meet Dee Dee through the Woodshed Network. I'm an alum of the Women in Jazz Fellowship that she runs called Woodshed Network. And I was like, boy, I used to listen to you on the radio, Jazz Night in America, and how radical and amazing that was to hear a vocalist as the presenter. It's just so important to, tell our own stories. And so those are always the kind of artists that I'm kind of gravitating to in jazz and no matter what music it is.
So tell me why Nite Bjuti works. You got three separate talents coming together. Why does this band work?
I think that there is I know there's a transcendent human connection, which is always why people, audiences fall in love with the band. We have this riveting human connection and a mutual passion for the stories that we want to tell. They always feel like shared stories, even though we've all have our own journeys and, lived different lives. And I think that underpins the whole experience. I also feel, as I said, everything we do, we are always with the audience. They're never going to be catching up because we're all finding it in the same moment. We're all breathing the same air as we improvise. And we couldn't start to tell them what's coming next because we're learning it ourselves when they do, and you just have to be there. In the same regard, everything we make is just for the people who are there, so that's us as well. And then when we finish, we're like just euphoric because it feels like a gift, So it always feels like that for Nite Bjuti. It's this refreshment, and it has no end. So it's really nothing less than what I just said. It's really all of those things to us.
Yeah, and what an eloquent way of putting it. Nite Bjuti is such a sonic refreshment, and for anyone out there that wants to pick up the album or see you live, where's the best place for them to go to get all of this and to either see you or get your music?
Oh, well, thank you. That means so much to us. And the album is available wherever you buy CDs and vinyl is coming right up. Of course, you can follow us on Spotify. That'd be awesome. And we're on Instagram and, anywhere that you if you like to stream music, or you can buy music on Bandcamp or any record shop. And then we have some very exciting performances coming up at the Apollo Theater, the Festival of Arts and Ideas, which is curated this season by the really amazing writer Ta-Nehisi Coates. And that festival includes, many artists that you just love, like Stefan Harris and just many, like a range of artists who will be performing and speaking. And, yeah, that's at the Apollo on Sunday, October 8th. I'm thrilled about that. And then we have some residencies we'll do. We'll be coming to Providence, Rhode Island in November, and we'll be out west in California for a West Coast tour early next year. And we have some beautiful festival opportunities for everybody listening coming up that they want us to wait to announce. So you can follow us and watch that space, and we'll share with you as soon as the tickets are available and announcements can be made.
Wonderful. Candice, thank you so much for taking a minute out to talk about the band so eloquently, about the music. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and we're really happy to be here, and we appreciate the support as we're embarking on this journey. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Los Angeles, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Candice for her time, energy, and story. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Yeah.
Neon Jazz.